Hello there and welcome back to the Sleep Science channel, where your pillow gets paired with the strangest bedtime stories the cosmos has to offer. Tonight you're looking up into a crisp evening sky. There's a faint smudge against the velvet darkness, almost like a fingertip has smeared chalk across a blackboard. That little blur, glowing with a ghostly blue-green haze, is Comet 3I Atlas, or at least, it once was. You probably won't survive if you tried to ride one of these fragile icebergs, let alone breathe near it. But since we're in story mode, you're perfectly safe to float alongside. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is right now. Drop it in the comments below, and let's see how far this sleepy science family has stretched. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You drift closer to 3I Atlas, a visitor not born of our solar system but one that wandered in, like a stranger stepping into a neighborhood diner. It was first spotted in 2019 by the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, ATLAS, a sky survey project in Hawaii, which is why the comet carries the name. For a brief time, astronomers' hopes spiked. Here was a rare second interstellar object, after the odd cigar-shaped Oumuamua of 2017, and it looked like Atlas might swing close enough to be visible to the naked eye. There were dreams of a brilliant green arc across the heavens, rivaling ancient comets that terrified or inspired whole civilizations. But Atlas had other plans. Like a cheap glow stick from the corner store, it flared up with brightness, then cracked and fizzled out. In early 2020, telescopes caught the sad breakup, the nucleus splitting into fragments, sunlight glinting off dust clouds, the spectacle both dazzling and disappointing. Instead of the grand show promised, Earth got a faint whisper. The comet never became the sky-dominating giant that astronomers hoped. If you were paying attention at the time, you might remember the news cycle, a mix of excitement and oh, never mind. Still, there's a quiet beauty in that story. After all, comets are fragile things. Picture a snowball rolled together in deep space, laced with frozen gases and dark dust, then stored in a cosmic freezer for millions of years. Bring it too close to the warmth of a star, and the structure vents, cracks, and finally crumbles. That's exactly what happened to Atlas. Historical records show comets behaving this way for centuries. In 1844, the Great Comet of March blazed across the sky and then fizzled as it neared the sun. And even Halley's Comet, yes, the famous one, has been shedding material for thousands of years, leaving behind meteor showers like celestial breadcrumbs. But here's the quirky part. Some astronomers pointed out that Atlas' breakup didn't quite follow the textbook script. Its sudden fragmentation, especially after a surge in brightness, seemed oddly dramatic, almost too theatrical for a natural object. Historians of science still argue whether early comet observers mistook atmospheric halos for fragments, so debates about, is this breakup ordinary or not, aren't new. You get the sense that even in 2020, the cosmic gossip mill was humming. Was this comet simply unlucky, or was something more interesting going on? Of course, you can't help but imagine. You hover near those broken shards, pieces drifting like shattered stained glass across the void. Each one reflects faint starlight, turning slowly as if posing for your inspection. You wonder if, just maybe, the comet was more than ice and dust. Could a fragment conceal something else? A message, a structure, even a machine hidden in plain sight? It's a fanciful question, sure, but it has precedent in our imaginations. Science fiction has long used comets as disguises. Think of probes cloaked in icy shells, wandering across galaxies while appearing like nothing more than celestial leftovers. If Atlas was alien, it chose a perfect cover. An interstellar visitor tumbling along a hyperbolic path, already mysterious by origin, then disintegrating before anyone could examine it closely. Talk about an exit strategy. One joke practically writes itself. Maybe Atlas didn't break up. It just hit the eject button, scattering decoys while slipping something else quietly past us. Relax, you're safe. No little green stowaways hiding in your backyard, probably. The idea may sound silly, but remember how often history surprises us. Back in 1910, when Halley's Comet returned, newspapers spread rumors that its tail contained poisonous cyanogen gas. People bought Comet pills and Comet umbrellas to protect themselves, because apparently capitalism has always been ready for a cosmic panic. Scholars still debate whether those fears were genuine mass hysteria or just clever marketing schemes. Either way, comets have always carried a sense of mystery and danger. So here you are in the quiet company of Atlas fragments floating as if in slow motion. The sky around you hums with starlight, each point of light older than entire civilizations. Atlas is gone, but it leaves behind questions, and that's where the fun begins. What if it wasn't just a comet? What if, buried in those glittering shards, there was something watching? The story stretches ahead, and you keep drifting. You hover closer to the drifting shards, their surfaces catching sunlight in flashes of pale green and silver. If you lean in, you can almost imagine them whispering, though that might just be your own brain filling in the silence with something spooky. What happened here? Why did 3I Atlas come apart so spectacularly, when astronomers were already warming up to watch it glow across the night sky? Comets break apart all the time. They're the snowballs of the universe after all. But Atlas' disintegration was unusually dramatic. When it was discovered in December 2019, hope soared that this would become a great comet, perhaps bright enough to rival Venus in the night sky. Then, in March 2020, it suddenly grew hundreds of times brighter in just a few days, like a birthday candle gasping for oxygen. By April, it was falling apart, with Hubble capturing images of 4 major fragments drifting like broken teeth. The show was over before it even began. There's something oddly melancholy about that. You imagine Atlas, a traveler from another star system, limping into ours only to shatter before reaching the main stage. Some astronomers suggested the comet had been weakened by repeated heating during past close passes near its home star, so by the time it came near our sun, it was already hanging together with cosmic duct tape. Others think volatile gases trapped inside expanded too quickly, cracking it from within. Historians still argue whether older comets observed centuries ago broke up in similar ways, since the records are often poetic rather than precise. A medieval monk might describe a comet falling into pieces of fire, but was that fragmentation or just poetic license? And here's the quirky tidbit. One theory proposed that Atlas might be a fragment of the Great Comet of 1844. Both objects followed eerily similar orbital paths, suggesting that perhaps a single ancient comet broke into pieces centuries ago, and Atlas was simply the next act. If true, it means you weren't just watching one comet die. You were watching the continuation of a centuries-old celestial soap opera. Imagine that. A family reunion, but everyone shows up in crumbling condition. As you float among the debris, you notice the fragments aren't uniform. Some are as big as houses, others like marbles, all glinting in slow pirouettes. The thought occurs to you, what if Atlas didn't just break but release something? Like a piñata at a cosmic birthday party, only instead of candy, maybe, data crystals, probes. A tiny alien drone programmed to slip into Earth's gravity unnoticed. Don't worry, it's just speculation, but that doesn't stop your mind from poking at the possibility. You glance back toward Earth, a pale blue marble in the distance, And remember that the breakup happened just months before the world turned inward with the pandemic. While everyone else was panic buying toilet paper, a comet from another star was silently exploding overhead. It's almost poetic how cosmic dramas play out whether or not we're paying attention. If you lean closer to the chunks, you notice faint jets of gas still streaming out, like ghostly sighs. That's normal sublimation of ices as sunlight strikes them. But if you squint long enough, those plumes could look like controlled thrusters. Historians still argue whether Oumuamua's peculiar acceleration was natural or artificial. So maybe, just maybe, Atlas' dramatic breakup wasn't random either. Call it paranoia or call it curiosity. The line is very thin when you're staring into the abyss. A joke for you. If Atlas really was an alien probe, it had the same energy as someone showing up at a party, dropping the cake on the floor, and then just vanishing without explanation. Not exactly a smooth first impression. Still, you can't shake the feeling that something about Atlas feels like a performance. A comet from another star, flaring, fragmenting, then vanishing, almost like it was designed to dazzle for a moment and then slip out of reach. Scientists shrug and call it physics. Your imagination insists there might be more to the story. You stretch out a hand. Don't worry, your dream body is fireproof, and touch one of the shards. It feels brittle, almost hollow. Was it ever solid to begin with? Or was Atlas always destined to fall apart, like a message written in chalk before the rain came? As you drift away from the fragments, the question lingers. Did Atlas simply die, or did it transform? The fragments drift behind you now, scattering like breadcrumbs across a black velvet tablecloth. You can still see their faint green shimmer, but your mind keeps circling back to that itch of possibility. What if Atlas wasn't a comet at all? Or at least, not only a comet. Maybe the breakup wasn't failure, it was part of the plan. Let's indulge the suspicion for a while. Think about it. We've already had one interstellar visitor that baffled astronomers, Oumuamua, back in 2017. That cigar-shaped oddball sped through the solar system on a hyperbolic trajectory, which means it wasn't bound to the sun. It came in hot, zipped around, and left again, like someone sticking their head in the door of a party to see if it's worth staying. But Oumuamua didn't behave like a typical comet. No visible tail, strange acceleration that couldn't be fully explained by gravity alone, and an odd, flat, possibly pancake-like shape. Historians still argue whether ancient texts hint at similar anomalies, but Oumuamua was the first one we could measure with modern tools. So when Atlas showed up 2 years later, astronomers perked up. Another interstellar object so soon? That's like lightning striking twice in the same spot. You begin to wonder, are these random visitors really random, or are they test probes dispatched from elsewhere? A quick wink from across the galaxy saying, "Hey, we see you." The suspicious thought grows as you recall how Atlas brightened dramatically, then shattered into fragments. To most astronomers, that was just outgassing, sunlight heating the interior until trapped gases burst out, cracking the structure like popcorn kernels in oil. But to a conspiratorial part of your brain, it almost looks staged. Like a magician's smoke bomb. A bright flash, some distraction, and then poof. What if the real probe slipped away in that chaos? A small, silent craft that used the fragmentation as cover. It's a fun rabbit hole, isn't it? The way your imagination twitches at the idea. After all, humans have already considered disguising probes. Some futurists have proposed coating spacecraft in reflective material to mimic asteroids, or hiding instruments inside artificial comets to preserve them for long interstellar journeys. If we can dream up that trick, why couldn't someone else? Of course, skeptics will remind you, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and so far, Atlas has left none. But still, History loves a good what if. Back in the Renaissance, people genuinely thought comets were omens of disaster, fire-breathing dragons tearing through the heavens. Even the 1066 Bayeux Tapestry immortalized Halley's Comet as a harbinger of the Norman invasion of England. Some scholars argue whether that tapestry shows real fear or just medieval propaganda, but either way, the human brain has always been quick to suspect comets of hiding deeper meaning. Why stop now? Here's a quirky detail. In the 1970s, a group of Soviet scientists actually speculated that comets might contain alien probes buried in ice, quietly gathering data as they wandered between star systems. The idea didn't gain mainstream traction, but it lingers in fringe discussions like the faint smell of incense in an old church. Once you've heard it, you can't quite shake it. So you look again at Atlas' ghostly shards and let the suspicion bloom. Maybe that wasn't just a comet disintegrating. Maybe it was a disguise being shed. Maybe the core was never meant to survive sunlight. It was meant to reveal something else. A hollow cavity, a metallic glimmer, a seed-like pod now tumbling silently away from the broken shell. If you listen closely, yes, in this dreamy space you can listen. You almost imagine faint pings in the background noise, as though Atlas had been broadcasting all along, but buried so deep in the static that no one thought to notice. The kind of signal that looks like just another star's interference, until someone with the right decoder cracks it open. Don't worry, no ominous countdowns or laser beams pointed at Earth. If anything, the idea feels gentler, like someone knocking softly at the door, leaving a calling card and slipping away before you even answer. And isn't that the most alien thing of all? Not invasion, not destruction, but patience. A subtle arrival, a brief sparkle, and then a quiet exit. You breathe deeply, though of course there's no air out here, and let the thought settle. What if Atlas was not just a visitor but a messenger? Your mind drifts, and before you know it, you're remembering Oumuamua. That strange guest arrived first, and in some ways, Atlas always felt like its sequel, though sequels rarely live up to the original, do they? Oumuamua came barreling in during 2017, and right away it refused to fit neatly into any category. Astronomers thought it might be a comet, but it had no visible tail. They thought it might be an asteroid, but its trajectory didn't quite obey the rules. Then came its odd acceleration, like it was getting a tiny push from somewhere. Natural, maybe, suspicious, definitely. Theories poured in. Was it a shard of hydrogen ice sublimating invisibly? Was it a flake of nitrogen from some shattered exoplanet? Or was it, as Avi Loeb famously suggested, some kind of alien light sail? Historians still argue whether Loeb's bold claim was visionary or sensational, but it cracked open a door in the public imagination. What if interstellar objects aren't random space debris, but artifacts of technology far beyond our own? You picture Oumuamua again, long, flat, reddish, spinning lazily like a dropped credit card. It zipped past Earth at about 196,000 miles per hour, too fast and too faint for us to get a clear picture. No spacecraft could catch it in time. Like a celebrity making a cameo, it walked through the scene, everyone gasped, and then it was gone. If Atlas was a follow-up act, it had a tough role to play. But there's an eerie symmetry. Oumuamua didn't behave like a normal rock, and Atlas didn't behave like a normal comet. One refused to light up. The other lit up too much. Together, they almost feel like two halves of a riddle. One too quiet, one too loud. You hover in the space between them, trying to stitch their stories together. Here's a quirky detail. Some people joke that Oumuamua's shape resembled a giant interstellar pancake, which naturally sparked comparisons to UFO sightings of flying saucers. Others insisted it looked more like a cosmic cigar, which, depending on your tastes, makes it either mysterious or just the universe reminding us we should quit smoking? Humor aside, the object's geometry was unlike anything we had seen drifting naturally between stars. As for Atlas, when its nucleus split into glowing fragments, some observers likened it to a shattered spaceship, though of course that was said with a wink. Still, the coincidence nags at you. First a cigar, then a shattered jewel. Historians still argue whether people in antiquity witnessed interstellar visitors, recording them as omens, but with Oumuamua and Atlas, we finally have modern instruments watching. The fun part of this sleepy speculation is imagining the two objects not as accidents, but as installments in a long-running series. Maybe Oumuamua was the scout, sent to check if Earth had developed radio telescopes yet. Maybe Atlas was the follow-up, scattering fragments like breadcrumbs, planting seeds that will only matter centuries from now. If so, we're characters in a play whose plot we barely understand. A little joke for you. If Oumuamua and Atlas were alien probes, then the universe has a terrible project manager. One zipped by too fast for us to study, the other disintegrated before showtime. Either the aliens are trolling us, or they've got a cosmic sense of humor. Still, there's weight in the thought. Oumuamua forced scientists to accept that interstellar visitors are real, not just theory. Atlas reinforced the idea by showing up so soon afterward. What are the odds of spotting two in just a few years after centuries of silence? Maybe our instruments just got good enough. Or maybe they knew when to arrive. You turn slowly, gazing at the star field, and it's easy to imagine a hidden choreography. Distant civilizations flicking comets across the board like chess pieces, watching how we react. Oumuamua tested our curiosity. Atlas tested our disappointment. Both left us wanting more. You drift onward, carrying that thought like a lantern in the dark. Maybe these weren't isolated accidents, but the beginning of a pattern. The stars blur gently as you drift further, and your attention settles not on shapes or trajectories this time, but on ingredients. Atlas may have shattered, but the dust it released carried secrets, cosmic recipes older than Earth itself. If you could scoop a handful of its powdery remains, you'd hold a mix of frozen water, carbon compounds, silicates, and volatile gases, all baked together in the deep freeze of interstellar space. You're basically clutching a bag of cosmic trail mix, though unlike trail mix, you definitely don't want to snack on it. Comets are often called time capsules, and for good reason. The chemistry locked inside their ices is like a message in a bottle from the earliest days of planetary formation. When sunlight hits, those ices sublimate, spewing gas and dust into space, creating the glowing coma and tail. Atlas followed that script for a while before overacting itself into fragments. Still, the core idea remains. Comets are chemical storytellers. Historically, humans have looked at comets as dirty snowballs of doom, omens of plague or invasion. But in the 20th century, researchers began realizing they might also be bringers of life. The panspermia hypothesis suggests comets could deliver organic molecules, or even microbial life, across star systems. Historians still argue whether the amino acids we find in meteorites today originated in deep space or formed locally, but the evidence is compelling. Comets carry the raw ingredients of biology. Here's the quirky bit. In 2014, the European Space Agency's Rosetta probe actually sniffed Comet 67P/Churyumov-Gerasimenko. The results? It smelled terrible. Notes of rotten eggs, ammonia, cat pee, and a whiff of almond for variety. In other words, if you're picturing Atlas as some elegant alien probe, also picture it wrapped in a permanent stink cloud. Space is majestic, but it has a sense of humor. You hover close to Atlas, imagined fragments again, watching the faint jets of gas like ghostly fireflies. Those jets are made of water vapor, carbon monoxide, formaldehyde, maybe even methanol. To you, they're chemistry lessons in neon script. To an alien engineer, maybe they're just fuel sources waiting to be tapped. Imagine designing a probe that harvests energy from its own icy shell, recycling volatile gases into power, like a survivalist living off the land. That would be clever camouflage. Pretend to be a comet while secretly running on comet juice. But here, where debates come in. Some astronomers argue that interstellar comets should look very different from solar system ones, because the chemistry of their birthplaces varies wildly. Atlas seemed oddly familiar in its makeup, as though it could have come from our own Oort cloud. Historians still argue whether we can even tell the difference, given how little data we have. Were we looking at an outsider, or just a long-lost cousin that wandered back? You float in silence, staring at the dust cloud dispersing across millions of kilometers. Each particle could be carrying prebiotic molecules, the seeds of something waiting for the right planet to land on. Earth itself may owe its oceans to impacts from comets billions of years ago. And here's a sly thought. If comets can spread water and life, why not also spread information? Maybe Atlas wasn't just a snowball. It was a courier, scattering coded chemistry like glitter at a very nerdy rave. A quick joke. If aliens did hide a message in comet dust, chances are humans would sneeze on it, call it allergies, and never decode it. The longer you gaze, the more hypnotic it becomes. The gas streams look like ribbons curling in a slow ballet. The dust glows faintly as it catches stray photons. It's chemistry, yes, but it feels like art too. Maybe nature and technology aren't as separate as we think. Maybe for an alien species, the line between a comet and a machine is blurry. And so you glide along, learning a sleepy chemistry lesson from a shattered traveler, and wondering if the next interstellar object we meet will smell just as bad, or carry something more deliberate in its frozen veins. The quiet around you is thick but not silent. There's always a background hum in space, not in sound exactly, but in data. Radio waves wash through the void, a constant drizzle of signals from pulsars, quasars, and the cosmic microwave background. You float there, letting it seep around you, and imagine tuning an old transistor radio, the kind with a squeaky dial and an antenna that never quite stays straight. Most of what you'd hear would be static, but buried inside that static, maybe, just maybe, something deliberate. When Atlas broke apart, most telescopes focused on its light, the glow of dust, the shimmer of fragments. Few people asked, was anything riding along in the radio spectrum? If an alien probe wanted to hide its chatter, the perfect trick would be to embed it in the noise. A faint pattern disguised as randomness. If you've ever stared at static on an old TV and thought you saw faces, you know how easy it is to miss the signal for the snow. Historians still argue whether the famous "wow" signal from 1977 was a real extraterrestrial transmission or just a cosmic coincidence. A brief 72-second blip, strong and clean, never repeated. It came and went like a ghost, just as Atlas did. Scientists combed through data, but the source was never pinned down. Imagine if Atlas had left behind a similar trace, something short, bright, and gone before anyone noticed. Here's the quirky part. In the 1960s, some radio astronomers worried that alien messages might already be buried in the hiss of cosmic background radiation, but too cleverly encoded for us to recognize. Like hiding a haiku inside white noise. You could listen your whole life and never know it was there unless you had the right key. If you're dozing off right now, maybe your dreams are the decoder. You close your eyes metaphorically, since dream you has no helmet, and imagine leaning into Atlas dust cloud, straining your ears against the static. The jets of gas hiss like faint whispers. If you concentrate, you almost catch a rhythm, a rise and fall that feels intentional. Not words, not music, but something patterned. Is it real? Or just your brain turning randomness into meaning? Humans are notoriously good at that. Clouds become dragons, toast becomes saints, comets become probes. A small joke. If aliens really are sending signals inside static, they must be laughing at us scrolling TikTok instead of paying attention. We sent you math disguised as noise, and you gave it 3 likes and scrolled to a cat video. Still, the possibility is haunting. What if Atlas breakup was timed to maximize visibility not just in light, but in radio? When the fragments flew apart, they increased the surface area for sunlight to hit, releasing a burst of charged particles. To Earth's instruments, it looked like a natural flare-up. But what if that flare also carried a message? A quick transmission hidden in the chaos of dust and plasma, already gone before we thought to check. Historians still argue whether cometary outbursts have hidden physics we don't fully understand. Some flares seem too bright for the amount of material involved, leading to debates about whether we're missing pieces of the puzzle. The Atlas breakup fits right into that uncertainty. Was it just another icy tantrum, or was it engineered to look like one? You float there, ears wide open to the universe, and wonder, if Atlas was broadcasting, who was the intended audience? Earth, or some other probe lurking nearby, waiting to catch the whisper? The thought tingles at the edge of paranoia, but also curiosity. You picture 2 alien machines passing in the night, exchanging data like students slipping notes in class, while humans sit clueless under the chalkboard sky. The static deepens, and you feel yourself relax into its rhythm. Maybe there was no signal at all. Or maybe the signal is still echoing, soft enough that one day, when our technology is sharper, we'll realize we've been bathed in messages all along. The static fades, leaving you with the slow swirl of Atlas fragments. They tumble and glitter, irregular shapes spinning like forgotten toys in a swimming pool. At first glance, they're just rocks and ice, lumpy, cracked, and dusty. But the longer you watch, the more your imagination toys with another possibility. Maybe they're not as random as they look. Maybe those pieces are illusions, a disguise hiding something more deliberate. Humans love to find patterns where none exist. Faces in clouds, animals in constellations, conspiracy in spilled coffee grounds. Historians still argue whether ancient skywatchers genuinely believed comets carried messages, or if their interpretations were just cultural storytelling. Either way, we're wired to see meaning. And now, gazing at Atlas fragments, you notice how some shards look suspiciously geometric. One seems to form a triangle, another almost a perfect slab. Natural fracture or careful design. Quirky tidbit. In 2019, before Atlas breakup, astronomers briefly wondered if its elongated coma might hide multiple nuclei instead of just one. It wasn't, but the idea lingers. What if the brightness was a mask, concealing smaller structures inside? You imagine the dust cloud as stage smoke, behind which something sleek and alien could lurk. Maybe a lattice of solar sails folded like origami, or a black shard coated in camouflage that absorbs sunlight. You drift closer. In this dreamlike vision, the dust seems to thin, and one fragment glints oddly like polished metal. Not shiny like jewelry, but dull, industrial, functional. It could just be your mind playing tricks, the way stars sometimes twinkle when you're sleepy, but the suspicion clings. If an alien probe wanted to cross star systems unnoticed, what better disguise than to travel inside a brittle shell, shatter when close to curious eyes, and leave its true self drifting silently in the aftermath? Here's a joke for you. If Atlas really did hide a probe inside, it was the worst unboxing video ever. No dramatic reveal, just dust everywhere and astronomers sighing. Well, that's disappointing. Back in history, something similar happened with Halley's Comet. When it blazed across the sky in 1910, some newspapers reported that Earth would pass through its toxic cyanogen tail. Opportunists sold Comet pills and gas masks. Historians still argue whether people genuinely panicked or just enjoyed the drama, but either way, human imagination turned natural phenomena into hidden threats. Looking at Atlas now, you can feel that same instinct humming under your skin. The fragments drift further apart, and you notice how their rotation almost looks synchronized. Maybe it's coincidence, or maybe that's your sleepy brain turning chaos into choreography. Still, you can't resist the thought, what if their orientation matters? Like shards aligning to form a code, a geometry written across the night sky, visible only to those watching closely enough. Another quirky thought. Some UFO enthusiasts once speculated that long-lived probes could hide in plain sight by mimicking tumbling asteroids. If that's true, then Atlas fragments are the perfect camouflage, seeming random but deliberate enough to avoid suspicion. If Oumuamua was the flashy cigar shape, Atlas might have been the stealthier sibling, fracturing into a cloud of decoys. You reach out toward one piece, brushing its jagged edge. It feels brittle, icy dust slipping off like powdered sugar. But beneath the surface, could there be layers, hollow cavities, machinery sleeping beneath an icy crust? The thought is absurd, but then again, so was the idea of interstellar comets until 2017. The debris field stretches on like confetti frozen midair. You drift through, eyes narrowing at every angular glint, every shard that spins just a little too neatly. Natural, probably. But tonight, in this quiet liminal space, you allow yourself to imagine. Atlas wasn't just a comet falling apart. It was a shapeshifter, casting illusions of fragility while something else slipped away, unnoticed. The dust and fragments drift farther into the black, and you follow them, though slowly, like you're wading through water in a dream. The thought creeps in. Maybe Atlas wasn't meant to be dazzling at all. Maybe its purpose was to wait, to linger, to watch. The idea of an ancient watcher feels strange in your bones, but also oddly comforting, like a lighthouse beam sweeping across an empty shore. Scientists sometimes toss around the term lurkers when speculating about alien probes. The notion is that instead of beaming radio waves across the galaxy, like shouting into the void, an advanced civilization might prefer to tuck little machines into safe spots where they can wait quietly for billions of years, observing any civilizations that bloom nearby. Earth itself could be under such a gaze right now. Atlas, being interstellar, would be a perfect candidate. Arrive looking natural, sit silently in orbit or drift nearby, and watch until someone curious enough evolves to notice. Historians still argue whether ancient cultures saw similar visitors. The idea is fringe, sure, but some interpretations of petroglyphs and myths suggest sky objects that stayed in one place for many nights were recorded, not just streaking comets. Were those exaggerated memories of comets, or of something holding position, something with patience? No one knows, but you can imagine the storytellers huddled around a fire, whispering that the bright visitor above was not just a rock but an eye. Here's a quirky detail. In 2019, a research team proposed that hidden probes could be parked at Earth's co-orbital objects, asteroids that share our orbit around the sun, moving almost invisibly alongside us. If humans can think of hiding places, surely aliens could too. Atlas, breaking up near Earth, feels like it auditioned for the role of a cosmic spy, even if unintentionally. You drift closer to one of Atlas' ghostly shards and imagine it blinking awake. A small aperture opening, a lens focusing. No drama, no Independence Day beam blasting cities. Just quiet watching, like a motion-activated camera on a lonely hiking trail. Maybe it doesn't care about our skyscrapers or smartphones. Maybe it just wants to see if we make it long enough to notice the watchers. Joke time. If Atlas really was an alien surveillance device, It probably turned itself off when it saw humans arguing about whether pineapple belongs on pizza. Nope, not ready for contact. Try again in 1,000 years. But the thought lingers. Maybe Atlas wasn't designed to communicate but to observe. After all, communication assumes trust. Observation requires only patience. And patience is something the universe has in abundance. A machine could float for eons, powered by trickles of energy from radioactive decay or harvested from cosmic rays. Long after human empires rise and crumble, such watchers could still be out there, staring with unblinking lenses. Historians still argue whether it's arrogance or humility to imagine Earth interesting enough to warrant a watchful eye. Are we just one of countless civilizations studied by drifting machines? Or are we so rare that even one watcher would be priceless to its creators? You breathe deeply, feeling that paradox settle in your chest like a warm stone. The fragments scatter wider, fading into invisibility, but you can't shake the sense that eyes remain. Not hostile, not even curious in the human sense, just present, quiet, watching. And you're drifting in their gaze, a tiny figure wrapped in the cosmic night, wondering if you were meant to notice all along. The thought of watchers fades into something more hands-on as you drift along with the remnants of Atlas. If it wasn't a simple comet, maybe it was something older, something that once had a purpose but has since fallen into ruin. You begin to imagine yourself as a space archaeologist, brushing away dust not from ancient tombs, but from frozen shards drifting between stars. Space archaeology sounds like a science fiction job title, but it's already halfway real. Scientists have proposed searching the Moon, Mars, or even Earth orbit for alien artifacts that could have been left behind millions of years ago. After all, rocks can last for eons, while signals fade in seconds. The fragments of Atlas might be just such a sight, ruins of a machine so ancient its creators are long gone. Imagine drifting into one of those shards and finding a hollow cavity, a chamber lined with geometric ridges, the cosmic equivalent of hieroglyphs etched into ice. Historians still argue whether early myths of heavenly ships were symbolic or literal. Some fringe interpretations suggest cultures may have witnessed strange sky objects that didn't behave like comets or stars, and recorded them as divine craft. Whether true or not, the instinct to interpret the sky archaeologically is ancient. Tonight, you're leaning into that instinct, floating in a dust cloud like an interstellar Howard Carter, waiting for the sealed door to crack open. Here's a quirky fact. In 2017, when Oumuamua passed through, some researchers joked about catching it and putting it in a museum. As if the Smithsonian had a spare wing ready for extraterrestrial probe, circa 10 billion BC. The humor hides a real idea, though, treating interstellar objects not just as rocks, but as artifacts worth preserving. If Atlas was truly alien, then its breakup wasn't just a scientific curiosity. It was vandalism by nature, scattering an archive across the void before we could study it. You hover near a fragment and imagine brushing away powder to reveal layers beneath. Maybe metallic veins, maybe intricate carvings, or maybe nothing but brittle ice. That's the trick with archaeology: 99% dust, 1% treasure, and endless arguments about what counts as which. Joke for you. Imagine if the first alien relic we ever find turns out to be a cosmic equivalent of a broken coffee maker. Humanity waits millennia, and the universe hands us space junk. But even junk can tell stories. Archaeologists on Earth reconstruct entire cultures from pottery shards and fire pits. A shattered probe could tell us about propulsion methods, energy storage, even the artistic sensibilities of beings we'll never meet. Maybe Atlas fragments were meant to scatter, leaving behind a trail of clues, like breadcrumbs leading curious civilizations towards some larger truth. Historians still argue whether archaeology should include searching for technosignatures, not just buildings or artifacts, but things like unusual orbital debris or engineered isotopes. If so, comets become prime candidates for study. They're cold, they preserve things well, and they're common enough to blend in. The perfect vaults for interstellar couriers. As you drift through Atlas dust, you picture yourself holding a trowel, brushing away grains of carbon and frozen water, whispering, "What are you hiding?" Every particle glints as though it could contain a secret. Most won't. Some might. That's the allure. Archaeology is as much about patience as discovery, and patience is exactly what this dreamlike space offers. You feel yourself slowing down, letting the fragments spread like ancient ruins across the canvas of night. Maybe Atlas wasn't just a comet. Maybe it was a relic, a message in a broken bottle, a ruin drifting patiently until we grew curious enough to see it as more. You've brushed the dust away in your imagination, uncovering hints of age and mystery in Atlas remains. But another thought creeps in. If this object were a machine, or even partly so, how on Earth, or rather how in the galaxy, would it have powered itself? Because drifting for millions of years between stars is not the kind of road trip you survive on a single tank of gas. The simplest answer is sunlight, of course. That's what humans dream of harnessing with solar sails, giant reflective sheets that catch photons like wind in canvas. Oumuamua's strange acceleration sparked speculation that maybe it was just such a sail. But solar power only works near stars. For most of interstellar space, there's just darkness and a trickle of photons. Atlas, with its icy body, might have had another option. Think of a comet not as a snowball, but as a battery. Inside its frozen layers are volatile compounds, carbon monoxide, methane, ammonia, that can release energy when warmed or chemically processed. An alien probe could, in theory, feed on its own shell, cracking molecules to generate electricity. Imagine a little machine tapping into comet ice like a camper rigging a stove out of whatever's left in the cooler. It's low-tech in feel, but brilliant in execution. Historians still argue whether Earth's earliest life relied on similar tricks, using chemical gradients around hydrothermal vents as energy sources. If biology can live off chemical leftovers, why not machines? Perhaps Atlas was designed as both cover and power pack, a self-fueling disguise. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some comets release so much gas they produce temporary atmospheres around themselves, thin, fragile shrouds hundreds of thousands of kilometers wide. For a machine hidden inside, that atmosphere would be like a constant recharge station, endlessly recycling particles. Imagine hiding your laptop inside a snow cone that recharges itself every time it gets near a light bulb. You drift closer to a fragment, picturing what might lie beneath. Perhaps coils of superconductors wrapped around fissures, siphoning off the faint heat of radioactive isotopes embedded in the ice. Radioactive decay is one of the steadiest power sources in the universe. It's what keeps Voyager's instruments running even now, nearly 50 years after launch. If humans already use that trick, aliens could too, scaling it up into million-year machines. A small joke bubbles up. If Atlas was an alien probe, it might have been the universe's most eco-friendly traveler. Zero emissions, 100% renewable comet use power. Greenpeace would be proud. But the thought lingers seriously. Fragility may not have been failure. The comet's breakup could have been part of the energy cycle. By splitting apart, Atlas exposed fresh surfaces of volatile ice to sunlight, releasing more gas, creating more usable gradients. Maybe what looked like a cosmic death was actually a recharge moment, like a snake shedding skin. We saw debris. Maybe it saw a fresh start. Historians still argue whether Atlas' sudden brightening was a simple runaway reaction or something stranger. The flare seemed too intense for the size of the nucleus. If it were just ice venting gas, why so much so fast? Some explanations fit, others leave room for speculation. And in that gap, your imagination slides in. Maybe the flare wasn't an accident at all, but a deliberate ignition. A signal, a power burst. A way to say, we are here, even if we weren't paying attention. You hover quietly, picturing Atlas not as a crumbling snowball, but as a clever machine, built to sip energy slowly, hiding its metabolism in plain sight. Not a failed comet, but a survivor of deep time. The thought of Atlas sipping comet juice power lingers as you drift among its ghostly remains. But a new angle slides in. What if its fragility wasn't weakness at all? What if breaking apart was the whole point? On Earth, camouflage takes many forms. Some animals blend into bark or sand, while others fake vulnerability to confuse predators. Think of a bird that pretends to have a broken wing, luring danger away from its nest. Now imagine a machine doing the same thing on a cosmic stage, shattering on cue, looking like failure, while hiding its true function. Atlas could have been pulling the oldest trick in the evolutionary playbook. Don't look at me, I'm harmless. Historians still argue whether the breakup of comets has patterns we don't fully grasp. Some disintegrate spectacularly, like Atlas. Others just fizzle quietly, their nuclei gone before anyone notices. To most scientists, it's fragile ice succumbing to solar heat. But the possibility nags. Could fragility itself be a strategy? After all, what better way to slip under suspicion than to mimic a dying comet? No one suspects broken toys of spying on them. Here's a quirky detail. In the late 1800s, a comet called Biela's Comet broke into two pieces, both still visible from Earth. For decades, it was tracked as a twin until eventually both fragments faded into nothing. Some fringe writers half joked that maybe the comet had split to reproduce, dividing itself to spread further. Nature imitates machines, machines imitate nature. Which is which? Hard to say, especially when you're watching from the outside. You drift closer to Atlas' shattered trail, and for a moment the fragments look like a scatter of decoys. Each piece tumbles slowly, glowing faintly, a distraction for telescopes that can only track the obvious. But what if, at the very moment of breakup, something else slipped free? A smaller, denser core, dark and silent, cruising away unnoticed while astronomers mourn the comet's death. A little joke for you. If Atlas was faking its fragility, it basically pulled the same move as a phone battery that dies at 20%. Pretend it's out of juice, then sneak off to recharge. Camouflage in plain sight has always worked on humans. During World War II, ships were painted in bizarre patterns called dazzle camouflage, not to hide, but to confuse observers about their size and direction. Maybe Atlas was doing the same thing. By breaking up, it mudded its own story. Was it natural? Was it rare? Was it connected to the 1844 comet? Historians still argue whether that orbital connection is real or coincidence. If Atlas was playing camouflage, then the confusion itself was the success. You float among the fragments, dust swirling lazily around you, and you realize fragility doesn't have to mean weakness. Sometimes it means adaptability. Sometimes it means misdirection. Maybe Atlas wasn't failing when it shattered. Maybe it was surviving by letting us underestimate it. And so you drift on, a little less certain that a broken comet is ever just broken. The debris cloud of Atlas has thinned, scattering into the vastness like the smoke of a dying fire. You let yourself drift back toward Earth, that blue and white marble glimmering in the distance. It's easy to forget, in all the speculation about probes and watchers, that Atlas actually came remarkably close to us, cosmically speaking. At its peak, it swung by within about 72 million miles. That sounds far, but in astronomical terms, it's a friendly nudge, a neighbor dropping by without knocking. If Atlas had held together, its green glow might have been visible to the naked eye, brushing across twilight skis in the spring of 2020. Imagine standing in your backyard then, eyes tilted upward, while a comet from another star blazed overhead. Instead, you got fragments and dust, faint and forgettable. But what if it hadn't broken? What if Atlas had drifted closer, intact, giving Earth an unblinking view of its strange heart? Historians still argue whether ancient comet encounters shaped human events more than we admit. In 1066, Halley's Comet appeared just before the Battle of Hastings, immortalized in the Bayeux Tapestry. Was it a coincidence, or did its terrifying appearance embolden armies, shake morale, bend history? We'll never know, but we can imagine. In a parallel world, maybe Atlas became the modern omen, sweeping overhead while humans wrestled with a pandemic, seeding myths of cosmic signs into headlines and hashtags. A quirky tidbit: when comets pass close enough, they don't just shine, they sometimes dump material into Earth's path. Months later, the planet drifts through those dust trails and we get meteor showers. If Atlas had held itself together, it could have gifted future skywatchers with a sparkling yearly show, a new celestial holiday. Instead, its fragments dispersed too widely, leaving only a faint trace. It was like a guest who arrived at your party, dropped a single peanut and left. But what if that closeness was intentional? Imagine Atlas as an alien probe, designed not to crash, not to conquer, but simply to observe from just the right distance. Close enough to see continents, cities, radio chatter, far enough to avoid suspicion. Like a tourist snapping photos from the edge of town, blending in without ever talking to the locals. From 72 million miles, Earth would be a dazzling jewel. Auroras dancing at the poles, lightning storms flashing, human-made light glowing in clusters across the night side. For a machine with sensitive instruments, it would be more than enough to study us in detail. Here's a little joke. If Atlas really was watching us in 2020, it probably tuned in for 5 minutes, saw toilet paper shortages and Zoom calls and thought, yeah, they're not ready. You hover between Atlas, fatting wake, and Earth's glow, feeling the distance shrink and expand all at once. Was it chance that the comet came this close? Or choreography? Historians still argue whether interstellar visitors will be rare or common now that we have the tools to see them. But two within just a few years, Oumuamua and Atlas, make you wonder if perhaps the timing was deliberate, as though something waited for humanity's telescopes to sharpen, then sent emissaries at just the right moment. The fragments of Atlas fade behind you, but the thought doesn't. What did it see of us that quiet spring when the world was distracted? Maybe nothing at all, maybe everything. You leave behind the fatting shimmer of Atlas dust and tune your senses back toward Earth. Down there, while you float in cosmic speculation, a network of listening posts stretches across continents and orbits, giant ears tilted toward the stars. Humanity has always had a habit of listening harder than speaking, as though we're waiting for a knock on the door rather than knocking ourselves. You picture Arecibo before its collapse, its great dish cradled in Puerto Rican hills, once sending a radio message toward a distant star cluster in 1974. A binary postcard with numbers, DNA, and a friendly diagram of humans waving awkwardly. Historians still argue whether that message was brave outreach or a risky reveal. But either way, it was short, less than 3 minutes of cosmic small talk, and hasn't been repeated. Meanwhile, our listening stations work tirelessly, scanning for whispers that might ride the background static. Quirky fact: some of the world's most sensitive radio telescopes, like the Allen Telescope Array or FAST in China, occasionally pick up puzzling blips. Most turn out to be interference, cell phones, satellites, or even microwaves from observatory break rooms. Yes, the famous Puritan mystery at Australia's Parkes Telescope was traced back to staff opening microwave ovens before the timer finished. Aliens, It turns out, love popcorn. Still, every unexplained signal sparks a heartbeat of wonder. What if, just once, the data curve doesn't flatten into noise? You drift near Earth's orbit, gazing at the clustered dishes below, each one like a sunflower facing the cosmos. Maybe you think Atlas wasn't only a watcher. Maybe it was also a broadcaster. Its fragmentation could have been a transmission event, a flare not meant for our eyes but for our ears. Did our instruments miss it? Or did they record it and shrug it off as just another cometary outburst? The possibility hums softly, like a note on the edge of hearing. A small joke. If an alien probe did send a carefully coded signal during Atlas breakup, it probably ended up filed in some intern's folder labeled Miscellaneous Comet Data, 2020. Right now it's sitting next to a spreadsheet about dust temperatures. The idea of listening is older than radio. Cultures have always leaned into the sky with their ears, metaphorically at first, literally now. From oracle bones in China interpreting celestial events to Navajo chants about star beings, humanity has treated the cosmos as something that speaks. Our modern telescopes are just the latest iteration of that instinct. And yet, for all our listening, silence persists. Or does it? Historians still argue whether the Fermi paradox is a sign of emptiness or of signals too subtle for us to recognize. Perhaps Atlas was one of those subtleties, a comet-shaped whisper slipping right past our ears. You imagine lying on your back in a quiet field, the night air cool, the Milky Way smeared above you. Somewhere out there, a message could already be passing, inaudible to your ears but bouncing off dishes and antennas half a world away. Maybe it's encoded in the hiss of hydrogen lines. Maybe it's woven into the scatter of comet dust. Maybe it came and went while you weren't paying attention. And so you float there, listening with the planet, a tiny eavesdropper under an infinite ceiling, waiting for the faintest signal that might someday confirm that you are not, in fact, listening alone. The hum of Earth's radio dishes fades behind you as your mind circles back to the endless question, natural or artificial? The story of Atlas hangs on that fork. Most scientists lean toward fragile snowball that fell apart. But the doubt remains, fed by every strange behavior, every eerie coincidence. Alien engineering, or just cosmic physics playing tricks? Oumuamua sparked this very debate. Its odd acceleration couldn't be fully explained, so some suggested outgassing, others exotic ices, and still others like Avi Loeb, the possibility of artificial design. The argument made headlines and stirred controversy. Historians still argue whether Loeb's boldness was reckless speculation or necessary provocation, but one thing is clear. He cracked open space for the question. If one interstellar object might be engineered, why not another? Atlas fell neatly into that newly widened lane of possibility. Here's a quirky parallel. In the 1800s, astronomers once thought Mars was crisscrossed with artificial canals. Giovanni Schiaparelli's Canali turned into Percival Lowell's grand maps of Martian irrigation systems, drawn with ruler-straight precision. Later telescopes proved they were illusions, artifacts of optics and human imagination. Yet for decades, people debated whether Martians were real engineers. That pattern repeats. Every time the cosmos throws us something ambiguous, we argue whether it's natural wonder or intelligent handiwork. You float near the phantom shards of Atlas again, weighing each possibility. Natural, an icy rock from another star, heated and cracked by sunlight, disintegrating as comets do. Artificial, a machine cloaked in cometary debris, staging its own breakup as camouflage. Which is more extraordinary? Which is more likely? And here's the trick: extraordinary likelihood doesn't always calm the imagination. A joke floats up. If alien engineers really did design Atlas, they clearly skipped quality control. Congratulations, Your probe lasted exactly one orbit before face planting into glitter. Still, fragility can be clever engineering. Think of origami satellites humans are designing now, delicate folds that look like toys, but unfold into precise instruments. If we can imagine building structures meant to collapse gracefully, perhaps others have too. The line between natural disintegration and engineered decay blurs, and in that blur, debates flourish. Historians still argue whether interstellar visitors are rare one-offs or part of a larger population we've only just begun to detect. If they're common, then Atlas, fragility was just coincidence. If they're rare, then every anomaly becomes loaded with suspicion. That's why the scholarly quarrels matter, not just for Atlas, but for every rock, shard, and icy traveler we'll spot in years to come. You drift away from the fragments, carrying the debate with you. Natural? Artificial? Maybe both. Maybe Atlas began as a comet and was later hijacked, repurposed, layered with hidden machinery. Or maybe it was simply ice and dust, beautiful in its own right, its alienness residing not in design but in its birthplace beyond our sun. For now, you leave the question unresolved, letting it echo softly. Comet or creation, ruin or relic. The debate itself is proof of our curiosity, our endless hunger to ask whether the universe builds alone or whether someone else is building too. You drift through the dark, the argument over Atlas, nature still echoing faintly, when another thread tugs at you, not science this time, but story. Humans have always wrapped comets in myth, and Atlas comes pre-wrapped in a name borrowed from legend. In Greek mythology, Atlas was the titan condemned to hold up the heavens for eternity, not crushed beneath, but carrying the weight. His image lingers in statues, maps, even the starry constellation. To name an interstellar comet after him feels almost poetic, a celestial wanderer burdened with mystery, a fragile giant shouldering secrets across the galaxy until it finally collapsed. Historians still argue whether the Titan was originally meant as a literal pillar of the sky or a metaphorical one. But either way, the symbolism sticks. Quirky fact: the modern survey that discovered the comet, the Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, was given the acronym ATLAS because it holds up the sky with its wide-eyed scanning. A cheeky bit of myth repurposed for technology. That means when astronomers named 3I Atlas, they were essentially calling it Atlas from Atlas. Redundant? Maybe. But myth loves repetition. You float there, picturing the Titan bent beneath his burden, and it's hard not to see Atlas the comet in the same pose, brightening, straining, then shattering. A doomed figure in the heavens, echoing stories told thousands of years ago. Every culture had its comet lore, fiery swords, messengers of gods, heralds of doom. In Norse myth, comets were sky snakes. In China, they were broom stars, sweeping bad luck across the heavens. Some Mayan codices even suggest comets as bringers of pestilence. Strange coincidence, then, that Atlas came and broke apart just as a global pandemic spread. Scholars debate whether ancient cometary associations with plague came from coincidence or genuine cause, dust and gases interacting with the atmosphere. But the myth survives, sticky as superstition. And jokes survive too. Here, one. If the Titan Atlas had really been holding up the sky, he must have sighed in relief when the telescope Atlas took over. Finally, someone else can do the heavy lifting. The cultural layers are thick, and you realize comets are more than physical objects. They're story prompts, mirrors reflecting human fears and hopes. Atlas, with its melodramatic flair and collapse, was ripe for myth-making, even if it only lasted a few weeks in the headlines. Maybe in some future folklore, people will remember the comet that came during the Great Plague, exaggerating its glow into something that burned across the heavens for months, rewriting memory into legend. Historians still argue whether myths of two suns or dragons in the sky were distorted accounts of comets. Maybe so. Maybe Atlas will one day be remembered the same way, an omen, a sign, a character in the eternal human play. You let the myth wash over you, blending Titan and telescope, omen and object. Whether alien machine or fragile snowball, Atlas has already joined the constellation of stories, carrying the sky in human imagination just as its namesake did in stone. The myths linger, but soon your thoughts pivot to something more mechanical. What if Atlas wasn't just a watcher or omen, but a courier? Not a ship carrying passengers, but a messenger carrying something subtler, information scattered in dust and ice. You drift into the idea, and suddenly the comet feels less like debris and more like a glittering envelope torn open too soon. Comets are already natural couriers. They ferry water, carbon compounds, and organics across space. Some scientists suggest Earth's oceans may owe much of their volume to icy deliveries from comets billions of years ago. Historians still argue whether isotopic ratios in Earth's water truly match those of known comets, but the theory persists because it explains so much. If comets can deliver water, why not data? Why not design? Here's a quirky tidbit. DNA can store staggering amounts of information, about 215 petabytes per gram. Humans are already experimenting with encoding digital files into synthetic DNA for long-term storage. Imagine an alien civilization doing the same, but tucking that DNA, or some exotic equivalent, into a cometary shell. Each dust grain becomes a thumb drive, scattering knowledge like cosmic pollen across star systems. You float among Atlas-imagined particles, each one glinting like a coded jewel. To us, they look like random dust, but to the right decoder, maybe they contain instructions, history, even art. Perhaps every fragment carries the same message redundantly, ensuring that at least one piece lands somewhere habitable. It's interstellar spam mail, but with better intentions. Joke for you, if aliens really are sending out cometary mail, humanity probably keeps tossing it in the junk folder. Meteor dust, delete. Meteor dust, delete. The courier idea echoes in our own efforts. When we launched Voyager, we gave it a golden record, a message pressed into metal floating endlessly through space. But compared to Atlas, that's a single envelope in a mailbox the size of the galaxy. Comets are cheaper, more numerous, more plausible. Maybe that's the trick. The galaxy is already full of couriers. We just haven't learned to read the envelopes. Historians still argue whether panspermia, the seeding of life via comets, is likely or fringe, but it blurs beautifully with the courier hypothesis. Perhaps Atlas wasn't carrying life, but the recipe. Scatter enough recipes and eventually some planet will cook the dish. If Earth was one such kitchen, then maybe Atlas was another delivery in an ancient system-wide subscription plan. Life delivered monthly, some assembly required. You imagine Earth centuries from now, with scientists finally decoding molecular signatures hidden in interstellar dust, realizing that Atlas was never silent. It was speaking the whole time, just in a language we didn't know how to read. The courier drifts away from you, its dust sparkling faintly like letters scattering in the wind. You let them slip past, each one a maybe message, each one a reminder that not all communication needs to be loud. Sometimes the quietest couriers carry the deepest truths. The courier image fades, and your thoughts shift back toward Earth, toward the probes we've launched, fragile postcards sent into the abyss. Voyager, Pioneer, New Horizons, little machines carrying our signatures outward, each one an echo of what Atlas might have been if it were alien. You picture Voyager 1, launched in 1977, now more than 14 billion miles from Earth, its golden record bolted to its side like a message in a bottle. That record holds greetings in dozens of languages, music, and diagrams of human anatomy. Historians still argue whether Carl Sagan's team should have included a map showing Earth's location. Was it bold openness or reckless exposure? Regardless, the probe sails on, powered by decaying plutonium, instruments fatting, but still speaking faintly across the dark. Quirky fact: Voyager's golden record even includes sounds of Earth, waves crashing, birds chirping, a baby crying. So if aliens ever pick it up, their first impression of humanity will be, essentially, here's our mixtape, and by the way, our infants are very loud. Compare that with the idea of Atlas carrying messages encoded in dust. Our probes look clumsy, almost naive. We're sending hand-drawn notes while imagining others scattering encrypted glitter. You drift closer to the thought. Maybe Atlas wasn't fundamentally different from Voyager. Maybe it was someone's Voyager, launched millions of years ago, wandering into our solar system just as ours wander into theirs. It could have been an old probe, so ancient that its creators are long gone. The universe is billions of years old. Civilizations could rise and fall countless times in that span. Our little machines are fragile compared to that timescale. Maybe Atlas was fragile for the same reason, just tired. Joke time. If Atlas really was a probe, then its breakup might have been the alien equivalent of your phone's battery finally giving out right after you find the perfect meme. Humanity has also tried to send probes disguised as something else. Pioneer 10 and 11, for example, carried plaques etched with human figures and a cosmic map. New Horizons didn't have such messages, but its data will drift forever once its instruments fail, a silent pebble indistinguishable from natural debris. Historians still argue whether future astronomers in other systems could tell the difference between a dead probe and an asteroid. That very question circles back to Atlas. How would we know if a comet was more than it seemed? You float alongside Earth's outbound machines in your imagination, tiny sparks moving through the dark. Compared to Atlas, they're almost comically small, but their intent is the same: to cross the gulf, to last as long as possible, to carry a trace of their makers. Maybe every civilization tries. Some use golden records, some use comet shells, some use methods we can't even imagine. And if that's true, then Atlas wasn't a stranger, it was kin. A fellow traveler, another civilization's attempt to say, we were here. The thought of kinship with Atlas lingers as you turn your gaze forward, not backward. Humanity has only just begun noticing these interstellar visitors. Oumuamua in 2017, Atlas in 2019. What's next? You drift into the future, imagining telescopes as watchful eyes sharpening their focus, waiting for the next object to streak across the stage. Right now, the Vera C. Rubin Observatory in Chile is preparing to open its all-sky survey. With its massive mirror and relentless scanning schedule, it will map the heavens night after night, catching faint movers that older surveys would have missed. Historians still argue whether Rubin's 10-year legacy survey of space and time will rewrite our understanding of the universe. Most agree it will, and among its discoveries will almost certainly be more interstellar wanderers. Quirky fact: some astronomers estimate that thousands of Oumuamua-sized objects could be passing through the solar system at any given time. We just haven't noticed because they're so small and faint. It's like living in a forest and only realizing recently that birds fly overhead every day. With sharper tools, we'll start spotting them all the time. Maybe even one per year, maybe more. You hover in that imagined future, watching as data streams flow into humanity's digital nets. Each interstellar object becomes a potential riddle: natural, artificial, a probe, a courier, a relic. The debates will ignite again and again. And one day, maybe, a telescope will catch one that doesn't just pass by but slows, lingers, behaves oddly enough to banish doubt. A joke sneaks in. Given how humanity handles surprises, if aliens ever do send an unmistakable probe, it'll arrive the same week your Wi-Fi goes out and everyone's too distracted to care. But the excitement is real. New space missions are already on the drawing board, concepts for fast interceptors that could launch on short notice, chasing down interstellar objects before they escape. A mission called Comet Interceptor is planned for later this decade, designed to lie in wait at a stable point in space, ready to pounce on the next unsuspecting visitor. Historians still argue whether this marks a new era of interstellar archaeology, but the term fits. Soon we won't just watch from a distance. We'll chase, catch, maybe even sample. And so you drift, picturing that moment. A spacecraft racing alongside a strange body from another star, cameras snapping, instruments humming, humans holding their breath. Will the images reveal a lump of ice and rock, or something with edges too straight, surfaces too smooth, behavior too intentional? That's the suspense of the future sky. The dust of Atlas fades behind you as your eyes adjust to what's ahead. More visitors, more mysteries, more chances to wonder. If Atlas was a question, the telescopes of tomorrow are how humanity plans to answer. You floated through Atlas dust and into the future skies, watching telescopes sharpen their gaze. But another thought creeps in, one that tingles like a forbidden daydream. What if Atlas hadn't stayed out there? What if a fragment had survived its breakup, slowed down, and made landfall here on Earth, not as a harmless snowball, but as an artifact? Picture it, spring of 2020, while the world was distracted, a glowing shard streaks through the atmosphere. Instead of burning up, it holds together, crashes gently, as gently as a rock from interstellar space can, into some quiet forest or remote desert. It smokes, cools, and sits there waiting. Would anyone even notice? Or would it end up mistaken for a regular meteorite, stuffed into a university drawer, labeled and forgotten? Historians still argue whether some of the mysterious meteorites already in collections might be interstellar. A few candidates have been suggested, their chemical signatures not matching our solar system perfectly. None are confirmed, but the possibility hovers. What if one of those dusty rocks in a museum cabinet is already an alien shard, hiding in plain sight? Here's a quirky parallel. In 2014, a meteor exploded over Papua New Guinea, and recent analysis suggests it may have been interstellar, the first interstellar meteor we've ever detected hitting Earth. Researchers are even planning expeditions to the ocean floor to recover fragments. Imagine if Atlas had done something similar, scattering its pieces across our planet. We could already be walking over them without knowing. Joke time. If Atlas really did land, chances are someone would have listed it on eBay as mystery space rock, slightly cursed, buy it now. Humanity never misses a chance to monetize the unknown. But beneath the humor, the idea grows serious. What if one fragment wasn't just ice and dust, but hollow, metallic, or etched with markings? What if it wasn't dead at all, but dormant, waiting for someone curious enough to probe deeper? It doesn't have to be sinister. Maybe it's more like a time capsule, designed to activate when touched, or when sunlight hits at the right angle. Or maybe it's nothing more than a silent recorder, quietly storing data about Earth until someone, human or alien, retrieves it centuries later. Historians still argue whether alien technology, if ever found, would even be recognizable to us. Would we know a machine if it were built from principles we've never imagined? Or would we mistake it for a rock, shrug, and toss it aside? That's the haunting possibility. That Atlas did land and we've already dismissed it. You float lower now in your dream, skimming Earth's forests, deserts, and oceans, imagining an Atlas shard waiting out there. Maybe it lies buried under sand in the Sahara. Maybe it rests in Antarctic ice, preserved for future explorers. Maybe it sank deep into the Pacific, its signals muted by salt water. The thought curls around you as you drift. Atlas could still be here. Quiet, overlooked, patient, waiting for someone to notice. The dream carries you onward, past shards, dust, and possibilities into a softer place. You're no longer chasing fragments or arguments. You're floating with the stars themselves, letting the idea of Atlas blur into something larger. Whether it was ice, machine, or courier, the truth is that it came from beyond, and that alone is enough to stir wonder. The stars above you glitter like sequins stitched into an infinite blanket. Each one could host worlds. Each one could host stories. Somewhere, perhaps, other beings lie on their backs, or the equivalent, wondering if their skis, too, carry visitors from elsewhere. The thought that you are part of a galactic neighborhood, not an isolated cabin in the woods, warms you in a way no starlight can. Historians still argue whether humanity is alone, or whether civilizations rise and fall faster than we can ever catch them. But in this drifting space, the debate feels gentle. It doesn't matter whether Atlas was just dust or something designed. Its very presence whispered a reminder. The universe is bigger than you, and yet somehow close enough to touch. Here's a quirky fact to carry into your dreams. Even now, comets leave behind meteor showers that streak Earth's sky like glowing handwriting. Every shooting star you've ever seen might have been a tiny particle from a visitor billions of years in the making. If that's not communication, what is? A nightly postcard signed by the cosmos itself. A last little joke. If we are being watched, then whoever's watching has been treated to centuries of humans staring upward, squinting, and yelling. Is that a UFO or just Venus? Surely they're entertained. The truth is simple and soothing. Atlas may have been alien or it may have been fragile ice. But either way, it joined the long lineage of messengers that remind us we're part of something vast. Whether machine or snowball, probe or omen, it brushed against our awareness, left questions in its wake, and disappeared. That's enough. Because every visitor, natural or not, expands our imagination. And imagination is where contact begins. So you drift with that thought, letting the stars dim slowly like lights turned down after a long evening. The universe hums gently like a lullaby played on infinite strings. And in that hum is comfort. We may not be alone. In fact, maybe we never were. Now the pace softens, like a tide rolling gently back to sea. You followed Atlas across light years, through dust clouds into speculation and myth. But here, at the edge of the dream, you don't need to chase anymore. You can simply rest. The fragments of thought drift away, scattering like motes in sunlight. The debates, the theories, the possibilities, they all quiet themselves as though the universe has pressed a finger to its lips. What lingers isn't the noise of questions, but the calm of knowing you've walked or floated among them. You've touched mysteries and let them dissolve, leaving only their glow. The stars above you blur into a soft haze. Their sharpness fades, edges rounding, as if the cosmos itself is preparing for sleep. Even Earth, that restless globe, feels hushed in this moment. Its storms quieted, its cities dimmed, its people settling into dreams. You're part of that hush. You belong to it. Your breathing slows, matching the slow rhythm of distant orbits. Inhale like a comet gathering light. Exhale like a comet letting dust drift behind it. Each breath carries you further into stillness. There's no need to hold onto the story anymore. It will be here tomorrow, waiting, but tonight is for rest. So let go. Imagine yourself as a fragment of Atlas. No burden to carry, no secrets to guard, just a speck of light gliding gently through a velvet sky. The stars are pillows, the darkness a blanket, and the universe a cradle rocking you to sleep. And as you settle deeper into that cradle, the last thought lingers softly. You are small, yes, but you are never alone. Sweet dreams.